one of the things I do a lot is teach women how to fantasize. And that sounds so crazy because I feel like it seems such like a crazy thing, because you think of fantasizing as something that people should be able to do naturally. If you see me leaning in, it's just because I'm trying to get allow Paul to join. People say, well, I don't fantasize, or I don't know how to fantasize, or how do I fantasize much of it? And I want people to understand that fantasizing is using a part of your brain that often we shut down. And you don't want to shut that part of your brain down. You need that erotic part of your brain to be functioning. It's the same part as the rest of your erotic part of your brain, but it's critically important to be able to like get turned on, because so much of what happens with sex is in your brain. So when somebody says to me, I don't fantasize, or I can't fantasize much of it, then what I do is I say, okay, we're going to teach you how to fantasize. And we're going to get that part of your brain functioning again. And people think that I'm a little crazy, because people feel like, how is it possible to train a part of your brain? And that's where, when I started reading about neuroplasticity, it just changed, like rocked my world. Once upon a time, we thought our brains were static. We thought that you were born, you had a brain, you learned whatever you did, and your brain cells started dying, like from the time you turned 18 or something. And that your brain was just the way your brain was. But in the last, I would say 15 or 20 years, we've become very conscious of how much we can reshape our brains. And that part of your brain kind of shuts down when you don't use it. It's called pruning, right? Synapses in your brain that aren't used just kind of shut down and get used to being disused. But you can kind of reactivate them again. So if you've had a part of your brain that isn't been used in a long time, which happens with women, it is possible to turn that part of your brain back on again. I am going to give one more shot here with Paul, but I'm not seeing him. Okay, yep. Go live with Paul Nelson. Let's try that. And okay, so it is possible to learn how to use that part of your brain again, right? If you use the brain and you activate the brain, then the idea is that the neurotransmitters in that part of the brain, the blood in that part of the brain, starts getting like plump and used again, and then it functions. So I used to once upon a time say to women, read erotica, watch erotica, but now I understand why it's working, because it's not just that it gets used to doing it, it's that your brain actually, the erotic part of your brain wakes up again. And that is really sort of the critical piece here. So I don't think, and what I wanted to talk to Paul about is the fact that men seem to not really need to learn how to fantasize. I'm not sure what that's about, and I would like to talk to him about that. Men seem much less likely to need to learn how to fantasize. But I do want to define for everybody, or for ourselves, for our conversation tonight, what I mean when I'm talking about fantasizing. I want to talk about the questions I always get. Like, when people say fantasy, they think I mean, and that's not what I mean. They think that what I mean is that something you want to do. So you're fantasizing, like, I want to have sex with a group of people, a bunch of people, right? So that's my fantasy. That's my fantasy, right? I want to do it. Something that I kind of think would be hot and sexy to do it. I want to have sex on a boat. I want to have sex in an airplane bathroom. I never quite understood that, because I feel like who the hell could fit into a bathroom? Okay, I'm trying again with Paul. If you see me keep pushing things, it's just because I'm trying to get Paul in. There's two different kinds of fantasies, and let me separate those for you, because I think it's important that we understand what we're talking about. One fantasy is something that I want to actuate, something that I want to make happen. So let's say I decide that a fantasy of mine is I want to have sex with another woman, right? Then I would actually be looking for another woman to have sex with. Or if I say I want to have sex in the bathroom of an airplane, that I might want to actually do that. That's not the kind of fantasizing I'm talking about right now. I'm talking about fantasies that live in your brain. Paul, I'm hearing you. Are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, so we're just going to have chat. We're just
yep, we'll just have a chat.
Okay, so the first thing I was talking about was how much I work with women to train them how to fantasize.
Right.
Do you feel like ever do that with men? Do you feel like that's important? You want to do that with men?
Honestly, that has never come up in the conversation. The form, where we go with men is...
Okay, you died. Paul, you died. So I'm really sorry. I don't know what to say. Paul, you got to talk to Lydia. You're gone. Okay. So I know Paul and I have talked about this a little bit, and he doesn't do this with men. And so the kind of fantasies that I'm talking about, the fantasies where you get into your head and imagine something that either could happen, but you're not really sure you want to have happen, or could never happen. Like, for example, if you fantasize about having sex with Martians, right? That's never going to happen. Or if you're thinking about having sex with 20 people, or you're thinking about having sex on a stage, like in a ballroom, like it's unlikely that's going to happen, but it's something that turns you on. That's the kind of fantasy that I want to talk about tonight. The kind of fantasy which, you know, kind of in your head excites you and turns you on. And I'm going to talk for a minute about the fact that women just do not, just seem just to be really scared of their fantasies. And it's hard for a little bit for me to understand. And I do spend a lot of time talking to women about this. Women edit their fantasies all the time. I cannot tell you how often women will say, like, I don't want to fantasize. My fantasies scare me. They don't always articulate it quite that well, but they may say something like, I always fantasize about women, but I'm not a lesbian, Bachava. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think you're a lesbian just because you fantasize about women. It just means that you like to fantasize about women. Like, that is where we really need to start separating out fantasy and reality. And I feel as though in many, many cases, we have like lost our ability to do that in this world. And, I'd love to see from a show of hands if people think that that's true. There's something about the fact that we don't understand anymore that fantasy is something that lives somewhere in some imaginatory world. And that does not mean that you want it to happen in real life. And that I think learning to enjoy your fantasies, oh yeah, I'm seeing a lot of hands here. Learning to enjoy your fantasies means relaxing and not worrying about what those messages you're getting are. So often, or many times, I'll have women talk to me about fantasies where they're overpowered, right? Like they're taken by somebody who climbs in the window. Oh, I'm getting a lot of hearts on this. And then they're like, oh my God, I definitely would never want to be like raped or have any kind of like violent sex. And I'm like, this is a fantasy. It is in your brain. And it's honestly, it's the easiest thing for me to explain to people if they can get it. Because, oh, I'm getting lots of hearts here. Because when you have a fantasy of somebody taking control and like forcing themselves on you, if that is your fantasy, you are creating the person. You are telling the person what to say. You are stopping the person from talking when the person talks. You're developing what the person looks like. You're doing everything you need to do to control that person, setting, conversation, experience. There's no part of that where you're actually giving up control. Let's just be honest here. So just because you're fantasizing about that does not mean that you want anything like that to happen in real life. So if you fantasize about women, for example, and you don't think you're a lesbian in real life, you have no desire to act on it, or you don't plan to act on it, that's like great, that's fine. And you shouldn't worry about what you're fantasizing. So, and for some reason, I feel like women are so hard on themselves. Like they're all worried all the time about whether their fantasy is PC, whether their fantasy is appropriate, whether their fantasy fits into their like value system. This is your opportunity to not worry about your value system and not worry about things being PC because they're just living in your head. So I need to make that really, really clear. It does look like Paul's not going to be joining us, which is so irritating to me because one of the things he and I once talked about was why people are nervous about their fantasies. And one of the things that comes up is always like, does it mean I'm cheating on my partner? And I know Paul was thinking that men have learned that they can't talk to women about, the fact that they fantasize because women find that really, really threatening. And I did get a bunch of questions DM'd to me about the fact that if I think about somebody besides my partner, my spouse, am I cheating? So I do want to address that for a minute. So I'm just going to let you guys know, Paul was supposed to be here, split the screen with me, and I'm really sorry that he's not, and I've got to figure out what the hell happened. I mean, I talked to him in advance. All was well. I don't know. I apologize. And if you're watching this, sort of stay tuned because I am actually having my first giveaway We're giving away like a little gift box that has like a vibrator and some coconut oil and a women's erotic stories. And so I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And I will put a post up if you have to get off. So check that out. Anyway, so one of the conversations I'll often have with women is that they feel guilty when they're fantasizing, and they think they may be cheating. And I think I've had women say to me, and I don't want my husband thinking about anybody but me when we're having sex. And I need to say to people that that's like a tad unrealistic. Don't you guys think? Like, think about this. I had this great conversation with a patient once who she was, crying because she felt like sometimes she fantasized. She felt about other men. She felt terribly guilty about it. And she felt like, oh my God, I don't want him thinking about anybody else. And, she had a teenage daughter who was dating a boy. And I said, your daughter, let's call her Lila. I said, Lila, if Lila goes through the rest of her life, she marries this guy and she stays with him, you think she's going to be thinking about him always for the rest of her life? And she looked at me and was like, no, that seems a little kind of unrealistic, Basheva. I'm like, yes, that is pretty unrealistic. And then I said, what about Lila's boyfriend? What do you think if he only thought about Lila when they were having sex for the rest of his life? And she just started laughing. She said, I guess he'd be a little bit of a psychopath. And I started laughing too, because I think that that's true. I think we have very, very romanticized and unrealistic perspectives on what and how we should be thinking about things when we're having sex with our partner. So it is kind of unlikely, especially those of you who are in long-term monogamous relationship, that you will get completely and utterly turned on and want to have sex all the time with your partner if you're only thinking about your partner having sex with you. It's just not, I'm telling you, it's just very unrealistic. And if we were a little bit kinder to ourselves and a little bit more understanding of our need to fantasize broadly and widely, I think we'd be a lot better off. So some of you may have heard me over time, and I did get some DMs from men or from people, from Orthodox Jewish people who were saying, well, you can't think about anybody but your spouse or when you're having sex. And I want people to know that if you're interested from a Jewish law perspective, I have a whole podcast on that. I'm not even going to address that here. The podcast is The Joy of Text. I highly recommend you look it up. It's been 5 years. I do it with a rabbi because I don't do the Jewish law stuff. I do it with a rabbi, and all we talk about are like issues of Jewish law. So let's put that one aside. But let me talk about, for the sort of broader public, this idea about thinking about somebody besides your partner when you're having sex, which is so normal and so common. What you need to think about is the fact that you're having this other person as a stand-in in order to make great sex with your husband or your wife, whoever it is you're having sex with, right? You're not thinking about this other person because you wish your partner wasn't there and you really wish it was the other person. So the example I use often is Derek Jeter, and I know that so shows my age. I'm old. Derek Jeter's a baseball player. For the young people who don't know that, I think most people know. You guys know Derek Jeter, right? Anyway, I always thought he was super cute. I used to use nurses and doctors as my example, but then my nurse practitioner said she really resents that. So I stopped doing that. So, but anybody who knows who Derek Jeter is, send me a thumbs up. Anyway, I'm getting a bunch of thumbs up. Okay, anyhow, baseball players, sports people. When I talk to people who, there we go. When I talk to people who fantasize about somebody, let's say it's Derek Jeter, I'm like, do you really and truly want to have sex with Derek Jeter? And they're like laughing. No, they don't know anything about baseball. They're not interested in really having a relationship with this person. I mean, maybe he's nice. I don't want to knock Derek Jeter, but that is not the issue. The issue is that there's something about him, his popularity, his triceps, his acumen with a sport. There's something about him that is a powerful turn on, and they want to use that powerful turn on to be able to have great sex with their husband or their wife or whatever it is, whoever they're having with. So what you're doing when you have a fantasy is you want to use that stand-in in order to have better sex with your partner. It's kind of like using a vibrator. I mean, that's what I was saying. It's kind of like using a vibrator or using a sex toy or using a sexy nightgown. The fantasy of Derek Jeter is no different than a sexy nightgown. If you put on a sexy nightgown and that makes you feel sexy and that makes you want to have sex with your partner, you should go for it. And the same is true about a fantasy. So if you have a fantasy about having sex in public and that somehow super turns you on, even though your rational brain says, oh my God, that's a horrible idea, I would never do that, that's fine. That is why it's a fantasy. You should use that and not worry about it and not judge yourself. And you should use that in order to have better sex with your partner as you go through life. And the truth is that if the more you learn how to fantasize, the more you learn how to turn your brain on and turn your brain off, the better that part of your brain will function. That erotic part of your brain will function. Your brain will get better at fantasizing. So in the beginning, sometimes it's a real drag for people. And that's why I always recommend books for women. There is a really good audio series called Dipsy. You have to sign up for it. I think it's $8 a month or something. And Dipsy does have these great erotic stories that are read by actors, so it's pretty hot. But I like books. I often recommend books for women. Women will watch porn, and again, if Paul was here, we would be talking about watching porn, because I think that's a very, very different experience for women and for men. But for women, I really like books. And the reason I really like books is because it makes you get the picture in your own head. So whoever the person, people, group of people, kind of people, whoever's in that fantasy, you make them look the way you want them to look. You have them behave the way you want them to behave. And so books give you a lot of like scope for the imagination. That's the best way for me to describe it. And in the end, we don't want you to just be in the books. We want you to have it in your head, right? We want you to learn how to fantasize in your head. So the most important instruction I always say to women when they're starting to learn how to fantasize is read a book of short stories, which is one of the things in the giveaway. So I'll talk about that in a minute. It's one of the things in the giveaway. But get a book of short stories and start reading through. And some of them will be not interesting. Some will be boring. Some will be yicky. And some of them will turn you on. Now, some of them may be yicky and turn you on, or probably not boring and turn you on, but some of them will be things that you're like, well, my head doesn't this appeal to, but my body is getting really turned on right now. Pay attention to that. And then look at those elements of what it is that's turning you on and magnify it. So if you're reading a story and a woman is being watched, let's say through a keyhole, and that's a big turn on for you, then you know, like, the idea of being watched is really a turn on. Now, can I play with that a little bit? Do I imagine her standing, I'm in the middle of Broadway and people are looking out the window? Like, is that a turn on? Or if you're reading a book and there's a couple of people in the story and you're like, oh my God, the idea of a group of people turns me on. So now in my brain, I can make that stronger and better. Your brain can always do a much, much better job of creating a fantasy for you than any writer, reader, whatever. So pornography, videos, books, those are great ways to start, but they are just really they're just not going to be as good as what you can create in your brain. So having said that, let me just spend a minute talking about this giveaway. And I am really sorry about the Paul thing, because we really want to talk about how men and women fantasize differently, and we'll have to do this again sometime. The giveaway, as I said, is a little gift basket with some coconut oil, which is a great lube, a vibrator, and a book of erotic short stories for women. And in order to be part of the giveaway, you have to follow me, which you're doing if you're watching this. You have to follow at Dr. Batsheva. You also have to follow at May's Women's Health. So at May's Women's Health, you look for that and follow that. And then you need to tag one of my posts. So it doesn't matter which one, and some of them are less risque than others. So feel free to pick the holding hands one, because my holding hands one is pretty benign. And you have to post it, share it, and tag at Dr. Batsheva. Because if you don't tag at Dr. Batsheva, we're not going to be able to know that you're entered in the giveaway, and we want to make sure that everybody's in. I'll have all the rules set up tomorrow. I'll post about all the rules tomorrow, so you can see that. But I really, really, really hope people do this. And I never tried a giveaway before, so you let me know if you like that idea. So people can, send me little thumbs up or hearts and let me know that that's working for them. So I apologize for the fact that Paul wasn't here. I think that we would have gotten a lot out of talking to the different perspectives between men and women. I think in general, Paul is feeling like men either they don't fantasize, they fantasize quite differently than women do. I think women fantasize with stories. Oh, seeing those hearts. Thanks, guys. Women tend to fantasize with stories and plot lines and things that are happening and being admired and being loved and being wanted. And men like those things, but also like to fantasize about body parts, you know, parts of either women's bodies or men's parts, whatever turns them on. Men tend to not judge their fantasies the same way we women do, which is not great. But I do think that people are embarrassed about the fact that they fantasize, and none of you should be. You should be working on it if you don't fantasize. So that really is my message tonight. I do something called Fantasy Friday. Every Friday, I put up a story, a little bit of fantasies. I save them in my highlights. And I would really encourage you to look at that if that's something you want to work on. But as always, I love getting your direct messages. If I didn't touch on something you think I should have touched on, send it my way. I'll do another one. And have a great, great night.